What's going on, everybody? Happy Thirsty Thursday. Welcome in another edition here of Mean Streets Live on our FTN Network YouTube page, coming your way on iTunes and Spotify as well, wherever it is that you listen to your favorite podcasts. We'll include this one in there. Why not? Well, let's get nuts here on a Thursday. Chris Meaney hanging out with you. My apologies for the late start here. Really having some technical difficulties. Dangle Batselli went a little long, and I don't know what's going on with the computer and technology for me and internet, and I was all over the place. I was just really laggy, so hopefully no issues here. Welcome in. We're going to preview tonight's Thursday night football game. We got the Saints and Jaguars getting it on tonight in Nolens, and we have some props for tonight's game. We have some start and some sits as well, and we're going to roll through a lot of that here now off the top of the show, and then address your questions. I will address them, answer them here. If you're hanging out live in our YouTube page, leave them in the comment section. I will get to them towards the end of this show. And if you are listening on iTunes or Spotify, you can always reach out at Chris Meaney on the X machine or slide on in the DMs. I see them a little bit easier when you tag me, but if you don't want to, maybe you don't want your league mates to know some of the questions. I see that sometimes. Somebody will talk. I think it was the other day, like, should I pick up Josh Norris in the NHL fantasy hockey? And then somebody had replied and said, I just beat you to I just beat you to picking up Josh Norris. So I ended up picking up Josh Norris. They're both in the same league. Josh Norris had a couple of Genos yesterday in his return, a couple goals for the old boy. But you can slide on in the DMs, meanstreetsftn@gmail.com as well. Any questions? I always circle back on these videos. So even if you don't have Twitter, I'm sure everybody has an email, meanstreetsftn@gmail.com, but you can find these videos for free, of course, on our YouTube page. A lot of people I like to listen to podcasts as well, rather than watch. Who wants to watch my ugly mug here? On our FTN Network YouTube page, but you could pop on over to the YouTube page and leave them in the comment section if you have any of those questions, start or sit. Tomorrow, like I always say, is a massive day. Tomorrow, we're going to show off the projections, my rankings, and we will have some picks against the spread and some props for the weekend, week 7 in the NFL. But there's a lot of guys that are just on practice on injury reports at the moment, and maybe it's just a rest thing, like Devontae Smith popped up yesterday on the injury report, didn't practice. Today is a big day. Tomorrow's even a bigger day, with that game being on Sunday Night Football. That should be a good one, too, between the Eagles and the Dolphins. Christian McCaffrey, just don't know, right? You need to have a backup plan for CMC. We'll get into those things in just a little bit. I want to start here with tonight's football game, the Thursday Night Football game. It sounds like Trevor Lawrence is going to play. He's trending up, playing in this game. They are on the road, and they're plus 115, as you see there on the money line. And we have a little bit of movement when it comes to the spread, but I'm looking right now, and I am seeing the Saints here as 2-point favorites. So they are favored at home. It's basically really a pick 'em, not massive favorites, despite being at home in this game. I like the Saints, and I've liked the Saints really all year long. I actually see a 2.5 out there. I do see a 1.5 at minus 115 over at FanDuel. Again, the parlay calculator, prop shop. These tools are just fantastic. We have links inside the description of this video. It just saves you a lot of time. Like, if you want to roll with the Saints, I would just pick them on the money line. Getting them at minus 130 is the best price I'm seeing now. 125 on the board here, but PointsBet is offering minus 130. So a little bit of money, I think, coming in on Nolens. And the Jags, the best I'm seeing is plus 118. But if you wanted to take them on the spread at minus, 1.5 there at minus 115, that's slightly better than the money line price. But whatever. It's not like it's a massive difference between the spread and the money line. I like the Saints team. I think defensively they're extremely underrated. They don't give up a lot of points. They don't score a lot of points either. You see the total here at 39.5. I think that it could maybe get over that number at 39.5. I could see like a 23-20 type football game here, but with New Orleans, they do a great job of stopping the run, and we've seen a really nice campaign here from Travis Etienne, but we haven't seen a lot of great things from Trevor Lawrence at the moment. And, he's going to have to deal with the knee brace. And, I don't think he's ever played with one. I'm pretty confident that he hasn't. I heard him talking about the knee brace yesterday on the podium. talking about how, he's going to have to adapt with that as well. But, Trevor Lawrence, 7 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He just has one game with over 300 passing yards last week, 181, but he did have 2 passing touchdowns. He only has 2 games with 2 passing touchdowns as well. So I think that he's going to continue to struggle in this game. I would be looking elsewhere, if we'll get to start and sits in a little bit, but I don't think either of these quarterbacks are great starts this week. I like Chris Oalve. You're playing Ridley, you're playing Kirk, you're playing Ingram, you're playing Alvin Kamara. It sounds like we will get Jamal Williams potentially back here. Is Taysom Hill gonna run 30 plus routes and catch 7 passes again? I'd say no, but I was completely shocked that happened last week. In a deep league where you got to start 2 tight ends and he has tight end eligibility in certain formats, I could see myself playing him in those spots. But Michael Thomas has been okay. We haven't seen the ceiling game for Michael Thomas. I mean, it could happen tonight, but Michael Thomas, for the most part, what you see is really just what you're going to get. I mean, I know that's a weird thing to say, but Michael Thomas has basically just been like 5 for 61, 7 for 55, 6 for 50, 4 for 53, 4 for 65, 5 for 45. Like, that's okay. Like, it's fine. It's, it's borderline wide receiver 3, low end flex. He's yet to find the end zone. He's had some red zone targets here, but it really is Chris Oalve who's getting a bulk of the work. Rashid Shaheed is kind of blowing the cover off the defense here and there. He's had some nice explosive plays as well. But it's really tough to roll out Michael Thomas with confidence. But seeing how there are 6 teams on bye and there's a ton of injuries, I have him roughly as a top 35 wide receiver. So even though I don't love the spot, it could be 7 to 12 fantasy points. I think that would be, that'd be a win, a wide receiver 3 here. So I like the Saints. I like the Saints at home. I think their defense, as I said, they're really, really good last year, top 10 defense, and a lengthy streak of allowing 20 or fewer fantasy point or 20 or fewer points overall. They did allow 20 last week to the Texans, but this is a defense 15 in the first week, 17 in week number 2, 18 in week number 3. That was a game they were really in control against the Packers. And then Derek Carr went down and Jameis Winston came in and they couldn't move the football. But I think they would have won that game despite Carr. If Carr was able to stay healthy. They got blown out by the Bucs. It was the first time they had a streak of I believe it was 15 straight games where they had allowed 20 or fewer points to the opponent, but they allowed 26 in that game against the Bucs. Then they shut out the Pats, and then last week, they allowed 20. Finally saw CJ Stroud throw for his first pick. We talked about that on the show. He's been really good, but that Saints defense would get in his face. And, no excuses. They missed a couple field goals. Maybe they're in a situation where they could have came back and won that football game. So I am in on the Saints. I think that they win this game. I take them on the money line, but I'm fine with the -1.5 there on the spread. Here's the props for what I'm thinking this evening. Chris Oalve is my favorite. As you see, the over 4.5 grabs at -130, the over 60.5 receiving yards at -120. I have him for the longest reception, over 22.5. Some of these numbers may have changed slightly. This is what I put in the bet tracker last night. If you're subbed with us, you get notified right away. You have the FTN betting package. You get all my picks across all sports, plus everybody else. MLB Dream killing it. Oh yeah, baseball. We've had a great couple of days in Major League Baseball. Had the over on the Houston. Get sidetracked all the time, right? October, 'tis the season, all the sports happening, but Dream is killing it. Gross is killing it in the NFL, in all the sports, but you get all the picks across all sports, projections, tools, with our FTN bets package, promo code Meaney, save yourself a little bit of cash. But I love the Discord. Everybody is super sharp. We talk out our plays. We talk about, line movement and things like that. And we have the FTN betting model, which is just absolutely killing it. Later this afternoon, myself, Abby, and Mike Randall will get together and share our favorite picks against the spread and totals, and we'll show off that FTN betting model because it is just cooking right now. It is absolutely hot fire. You don't even need us to give picks because the model is crushing it at the moment. But this is what I'm going with here tonight. And again, when you're subbed, you get notified right away. So you get those odds and those those best odds, but I don't think much has changed. I mean, maybe a little bit more juice on the Chris Oalve over 4.5, but the receiving yard, we have him for over 68 receiving yards in our projections. Actually, I thought I saw like 80 for him. I think he's going to live in the 80 range. He's had 10 plus targets in 4 of his 6 games. He's had 86 plus yards in 4 of those 6 games as well. There were 2 stinkers in there, which were tougher matchups, and one was just, the blowout there, but ultimately, this is the guy for Derek Carr. Chris Oalve is second in air yards using our free tool, air yards, over at FTN Fantasy, FTNDaily.com. Only A.J. Brown has more air yards than Chris Oalve. He's got a 14.3 ADOT. That's average depth of target. That means his average target is 14 yards down the field. That is the 5th highest mark among wide receivers with at least 25 targets. So he's getting the most targets. He is getting targeted down the field. He has a long catch of 24, 28, 42, and 45. So he's cleared this number in 4 of the 6 games as well. It just kind of correlates, right? If he's going to get a bunch of targets from Derek Carr, and those targets are going to be down the field, and he's really explosive with the ball in his hands, and you mix in the fact that the Jags have allowed the 9th most fantasy points to wide receivers, 1,000 yards to the position, the 6th most to wide receivers as well. So this is a plus spot for some of these Saints wideouts, but the guy that I trust the most is Chris Oalve. Then we have Alvin Kamara on the board here. The Jags have allowed 39 receptions to running backs. It's tied for the 3rd most in the NFL. 243 receiving yards to the position. That's the 7th most in the NFL as well. Alvin Kamara has only played 3 games. Alvin Kamara's got 23 catches in those 3 games. Now, we'll go back, and at the end of the season, we'll look at that first game where he had 14 targets and 13 grabs as the outlier game. It was the first one he had, and Derek Carr was dealing with that shoulder injury, and he was just checking it down. But even last week, 8 targets, 7 grabs for 36 receiving yards. His reception prop is at 4.5, and it's slightly juiced. So Vegas is thinking that this guy is going to get 5 grabs. I think he's going to get 4 or 5 grabs. And if he's going to get 4 or 5 catches, he's probably going to flirt with this number at over 29.5 receiving yards. This is the one where I've seen it's moved just a touch. So you may not be able to get that over. I want to share the projections. I didn't even really look at the receiving yard projections for Kamara. I just saw this number and I jumped on it. And, a shout out to a couple guys over at, I think I want to say, Rosenberg. I think I saw him pop in our Discord. It opened up at 25.5. So I missed that number, but he jumped all over that. And again, the perks of being subbed with us, and you get to see, these numbers. So we actually have him for 29.3 receiving yards. I think Ratcliffe's being a little conservative with the projections. He usually is, but we have him for 4.5 grabs on 29.3 receiving yards. You have him for 15.9 carries and 56.8 receiving yards, a 14.6 fantasy point day, and a half-point setting for Alvin Kamara. I would take anything as high as 32.5. I think he lives in the mid-30s in this spot. And since we're on projections, we have Chris Oalve for 5.1 receptions and 72 receiving yards. So well over this number as well. Hopefully we get this on like one play, right? Like maybe a 60-yard bomb, Chris Oalve. But the over 22.5 longest reception, -114, the over 60.5 receiving yards, and 4.5 grabs over as well, along with Kamara. And then the one Jag that I trust here is Christian Kirk. Christian Kirk for 5 grabs. He's got 33 catches on the season, 49 targets. He's had some pretty big games, and it's just the one guy that's shown us consistency, right? Like Zay Jones is not healthy. Christian Kirk has a game with 11 grabs and over 100 yards. He's got another game with 8 grabs for 84, 6 for 78. So he has cleared this number in 3 of his last 5 games. That first game was very quiet, but Zay Jones was on the field. I think when all 3 of these guys are together, the third being Calvin Ridley, we could see Christian Kirk fall back just a touch, but Ridley's among the leaders in drops. He's got to deal with Marshawn Lattimore here tonight. So we got Kirk in the slot, which I think is a little bit of a better spot, taking the over at 4.5 receptions at -124. I don't know if you just joined in, James, but we like the Saints. The Saints killed me last week. Couldn't beat Texans. Yeah, I mean, they're not a phenomenal squad. Offensively, I thought they'd be a little bit better. The injury, I think, has slowed down Derek Carr a touch, but he's got some nice weapons around him. Alvin Kamara and, Williams comes back here. The Jags offense hasn't been great. This was a top 10 offense last year, especially down the stretch of the season. Trevor Lawrence is really feeling it, but now he's dealing with that knee injury on the road. It's a tough environment to play. The Saints can get after a quarterback. So I'm not really feeling the vibes on either of these teams. I have been taking the Saints more times than not. And I'll lean with them today. And, the Texans, let's give the Texans a little bit of credit. That was a game where New Orleans was really in it. Again, they missed a couple field goals late. CJ Stroud's playing pretty good football, but I'm going to dive into the Saints. And if you caught those props, no worries, James. I'm here to answer any questions and hopefully give some winners here today. I like these props more than I like the Saints today, more than I like the total in the game. Chris Oalve, let's go. Let's have a day here. Rank them in order of how I like them. The over on 4.5 receptions, the over 60.5 receiving yards, the over 22.5 longest reception. And then we got Kamara in there for 29.5 receiving yards. And then Christian Kirk just went back there a little bit earlier. If you're just jumping in the show on the analysis, that's what I went to. That's what I went with. If you guys have any questions, starter stick questions, by all means, leave them there and we'll get to them. This is what I have here for now. And then we'll get into what you guys have. And then we'll get out of here. And again, tomorrow is a massive day. And I don't know if I said this, but the Houston Astros over 4.5 runs today against Andrew Haney. They have a history of lighting up Mr. Haney. I think that series will be all knotted up at 2 games apiece after tonight. Man, how about the Phillies though, right? Bombs away. These guys are fantastic. Week 7, bunch of teams on bye, a ton of injuries. These are players that I would start this week in week 7, players I like a little bit more than maybe the consensus. Brock Purdy. How about Brock Purdy and the 49ers? Last week, we told you the Cleveland Browns they're a juggernaut. They grade out really well in terms of DVOA. They are the number 1 DVOA total defense in all of football. And Kyle Shanahan had one of his worst coaching games of his career, and certainly in San Fran. 3.9 yards per play, the 49ers last week in Cleveland. That's the fewest in Shanahan's career in San Fran in the last 63 games. 215 yards, the fewest in 7 seasons under Shanahan. And still, ultimately, Brock Purdy, he missed some guys wide open. This is a spot here against Minnesota on the road. This is a top 10 matchup. The Vikings have allowed a 72.3% completion rate to opposing quarterbacks. That's the second highest in football. And even Purdy coming off that dud game last week, 67% completion rate. It's the second highest mark in football. Actually, I think it's the third, and he's second in yards per attempt. So even with Debo being questionable and CMC being questionable, still George Kittle that we like, still Brennan Ayuk that we like, ranking him as a top 15 wide receiver this week. Brock Purdy, first loss in the regular season. Let's not overreact. It was in a tough spot against Cleveland, still on the road, but a much better spot here. He may not have a lot of passing attempts or a lot of passing yards, but I think he'll end up with a couple touchdowns. And with some quarterbacks in some tough spots, like maybe Jared Goff on the road against Baltimore, Brock Purdy is a top 12 quarterback for me. How about Geno Smith? This guy has been very mediocre. I think we all expected some regression after Geno Smith had, his best season in like 10 years, a Pro Bowl nod. He was running around a lot last year. It's just not the case so far this season. I don't know. I think he's dealing with a little bit of an ankle injury, but a matchup this week against the Arizona Cardinals, who allowed the second most passing yards per game, the 5th most fantasy points to quarterbacks, 9 passing touchdowns to the position, a second most receiving yards to wide receivers. So maybe we could see DK or Tyler Lockett break out. I'm still not sold on JSN. He's coming off one of his better games, but still the third option on this squad. But I like Geno Smith to not even bounce back. I mean, he had 326 passing yards last week. He has 2 games with over 300 passing yards, but he only has 5 passing touchdowns. And like I said, he's not running a lot. 2 games of 20 rushing yards, another with 0, another with -4. In the first week, he had 6. That was something that I liked about him heading into the season. He was kind of sneaky on the ground with over 300 rushing yards last year, which was inside the top 10. But I'm playing him with confidence this week, and I think he breaks out. Sam Howell against the Giants. Sam Howell continues to get it done. Last week I had him as like a questionable start. I wasn't really feeling the matchup against the Falcons. He only had 151 passing yards yards, but he had 3 passing touchdowns, which made up for his day. He's got at least 16 fantasy points in every single start but one, and a really good spot here against the Giants. And he's top 5 in passing attempts, which we like. His teammate, Brian Robinson Jr., if there was any doubt about Brian Robinson Jr., the past couple weeks hasn't been great for him. 16 carries for Brian Robinson Jr. and just 40 rushing yards basically for him. So it hasn't been fantastic for Brian Robinson Jr., but he is getting some catches. He's got 11 grabs on the season. He's got 2 receiving touchdowns to go along with his 3 rushing touchdowns, 6 grabs over the last 2 weeks. And this is a top 10 matchup against the New York Giants. So if there's any ever doubt, just kind of looking at, his yards per carry and the amount of carries that he's had over the past couple weeks, this is a game where I believe he'll be more involved because this is a winnable game where I don't think the Giants will blow out Washington. And sometimes Brian Robinson Jr. can get game scripted out of the game when it's more like Gibson catching passes and playing in when they're playing from behind. But Brian Robinson Jr. should be able to rack up double-digit carries in this game. I like him to find the end zone. And it's just an added bonus that he's catching some passes out of the backfield. Aaron Jones here next against the Broncos. The last time the Packers played, Aaron Jones was a surprise sit. He's really only had one good game. He's missed a bunch of games. He was limited in one game that he returned. If he doesn't play, we can roll out A.J. Dillon. A.J. Dillon made me worthy of a flex play this week. The Broncos have allowed the most rushing yards and the most fantasy points to running backs and 8 rushing touchdowns already to the position. I think Jordan Love, if you're in a really tough spot because the Broncos, you can run on them, you can pass on them. They had a good game against the Chiefs, but that was a divisional game. I expect them to go back to just being atrocious on the defensive side of things. And I don't like any of their weapons, and we'll get to them in a little bit. But I think, Aaron Jones, you have him. You play this guy as long as he is active, and if he's not, then you roll with A.J. Dillon and consider A.J. Dillon as a flex play. You hope that maybe he finds the end zone. You have to be pretty hard up, but there's some tough spots this week with some teams that are dealing with some injuries, and we have some running backs that are questionable to suit up in this game as well. So that could be one for you. Ramondre Stevenson, last week we had him as a start, and it worked out. He had 15 fantasy points. It was his best game of the season. He was 10 for 46. He had a rushing touchdown, his second of the season. And this is why I liked Ramondre Stevenson coming into the season, because of his usage through the air. Week 1, he had 6 targets, 6 grabs, and 64 receiving yards. Then week 2, he had 3 for 10. Week 3, 1 for 3. Week 4, 2 for 10. Nothing in week 5 against those tough Saints. But he played the Dallas Cowboys and the New Orleans Saints in week 4 and week 5. And they just got behind, and the games were basically over. They scored 3 points in those 2 games, and Zeke was getting a lot of run. Last week, Zeke got a little bit of run. He did score a rushing touchdown, but we saw more usage out of the backfield for Ramondre Stevenson. He hauled in 5 to 6 targets for 24 receiving yards. So that's 16 opportunities for him. A nice bounce back spot last week. Listen, this Bills defense is good, and people have come at me when I've said that it's a good matchup for a running back. But if there's one weakness in Buffalo, it really is stopping the run. And Bills Mafia has been all over me for saying this all year long, but the proof is in the numbers. Buffalo has allowed the 9th most fantasy points to running backs, the 5th most rushing yards to running backs as well. Yes, Buffalo 8.5, 9-point favorites. I expect a big time bounce back performance from Josh Allen and Gabe Davis. And I like Buffalo to win this game by double-digit points. I think that means Stevenson will be on the field catching 4 or 5 passes here and there. And if they can get any, consistency on the ground early in the game, maybe Stevenson will rack up 12 to 15 carries. And, I don't think the ceiling is completely high, but if he can get 50 to 65 rushing yards to go along with 4 or 5 grabs, 70 plus total yards, that's worthy of like a low end RB2 in PPR formats. Keeping things going here, Javonte Williams against Green Bay, the 10th most rushing yards allowed and the 10th most fantasy points allowed to running backs. Javonte Williams was a game-time decision heading into last Thursday's football game against the Chiefs, and I thought he looked pretty good. He ran hard. There's a lot going on there. Jaleel McLovin. He is on the field catching passes, but Javonte Williams, I thought, looked like the better back. The lead, 52 yards on 10 carries is not fantastic, but it's all right. And, he's just really the training wheels haven't come off for Javonte just yet. Maybe this is a spot where they do. He's yet to top 13 carries, 13 for 52, 12 for 44, 11 for 42, 10 for 52. Like, that's okay. Those numbers are all right, but let's see him get into a range of maybe he can top 15 carries. And this is a spot where maybe he can do it. The secondary in Green Bay is pretty decent. We'll get into the sits in a little bit. I'm not feeling really anybody in this Broncos wide receiver room at the moment. But Javonte Williams against the Packers, maybe they can establish the run there a little bit. So I am starting him as an RB2 or a flex play. Deontay Foreman is on this list against the Raiders. Roschon Johnson still in concussion protocol. If Roschon Johnson is active and playing, I would play Roschon Johnson as a top 20 running back. I think he'll be the lead catching balls out of the backfield. But if there's no Roschon, Deontay Foreman, it wasn't great from him last week, but we like the opportunities. 15 carries and 65 yards. This is a better spot against the Raiders. They've allowed a lot of catches to running backs. You can run on Las Vegas. It's an inexperienced quarterback here in Badgett under center. No Justin Fields. So maybe they lean on the ground game just a little bit here. It's like a 3-point spread. So I expect this game to be tight. And I think that both teams, we could see Brian Hoyer under center for Las Vegas. I think both teams will really lean on the ground game. Of course, you're starting Josh Jacobs with confidence, but Foreman, if there's no Roschon Johnson, and then if Roschon Johnson is active and he can find a way to get out of concussion protocol this week, maybe by Friday, hopefully, then I would play him. Zach Evans is on this board. No Kyron Williams, no Ronnie Rivers. This is an automatic play, but with so many teams on bye and maybe CMC, not suiting up for this game and some running backs in some really tough spots. Like, for example, I would play Zach Evans against the Steelers over any Baltimore Ravens running back, over any Arizona Cardinals running back. I'm not saying that this is a smash, like 15 plus carries for him. He was playing behind Ronnie Rivers, so he was already, third, fourth on the depth chart if you included Cam Akers in week one, but it's like next man up sort of deal, right? Matthew Stafford's among the leaders in passing attempts. You can throw on the Steelers. I would expect a bounce back performance from Staffy this week, but Zach Evans, if you are in a tough spot, if you have Baltimore running backs, if you have Arizona running backs, Zach Evans could be, I think I have him like ranked in the low 30s, so let's not get carried away here, but he could be a decent flex play for you. And then to some wide receivers here, Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin's in a really good spot, an 8+ matchup against Adoree Jackson and the Giants. Adoree Jackson has allowed the third most yards per route run covered. It's the third highest of any cornerback on the slate, that from our wide receiver cornerback matchup tool. I've been a little hesitant to play him with confidence because of the rotation that I see with Washington, but I really do like this spot against Adoree Jackson. And then you see Hollywood Brown here, 10 plus targets in 3 straight games. Seattle has allowed the second most fantasy points to wide receivers. Last week was a tough game for Marquise Brown, but he did have the targets, and that is key. Devontae Smith was a sit for us last week. He popped up on the injury report this week. Let's keep an eye on him. I think he's going to be fine. I believe that he's going to suit up, and I think he's going to have a good game here. Miami has allowed 30 fantasy points per game to wide receivers. That's a top 10 mark in fantasy football. This is a high total game. Miami is going to score. Tyreek Hill can't be stopped. The Dolphins are definitely going to score some points, but they also give up some points, right? As much as they're setting records in terms of the most yards ever through 6 weeks, like they are absolutely electric on offense. They're still giving up a lot of points. Like Carolina jumped out to a 13, 14 point lead last week. They're having some issues stopping teams. So I think Devontae Smith, of course, AJ Brown is going to eat. I do believe this will be a really fun fantasy environment. And if anybody is willing to, I don't know, I get a lot of questions on Devontae Smith, what to do with him. Check in and see if he is available because it's only a matter of time before he gets going. He had a couple uncharacteristic drops last week, and I think this is a decent spot for him to get right. Wan'Dale Robinson, Washington allowing the most yards per game to wide receivers, 22 catches in 4 games for Wan'Dale Robinson, 8 targets, 8 grabs, and 62 receiving yards last week. He doesn't have a high ceiling, more value in a PPR league. My dart throw play of the week is Rashee Rice. Last week, we had the over on his receptions and receiving yards on that Thursday night football game. I'm going to go back to him as well. He's roughly a 33.5 receiving yard prop. The Chargers are allowing the most fantasy points to wide receivers, 7.7 yards per attempt to quarterbacks. It's the second highest mark in football. We finally saw a good game from Dak Prescott and Brandon Cooks last week. Was that on the Chargers, or is that like I was on the Chargers, right? This is a team that can't stop anybody at the moment. So Rashee Rice, I know they just traded for Mecole Hardman. It's the only Kansas City wide receiver that you can trust right now, and it's Wan'Dale Robinson. Kyle Pitts, double-digit fantasy points in back-to-back games now. He scored a touchdown last week. Oh, there's the bat for Kyle Pitts. Yeah, we're starting to feel him, so proceed with caution, but I'm going to play this guy this week against the Bucs, and the Bucs have been good against the run, and the Bucs have been good against wide receivers, so we'll roll with Kyle Pitts here. Logan Thomas, a dud week last week, but a good get-right spot here against the New York Giants. Let's look at players that I would sit this week, or at least look for better options in week 7. Kirk Cousins on the board. This is no surprise, right? Kirk Cousins in a matchup here against the San Francisco 49ers. Kirk Cousins has been pretty good this season, but the Niners are one of the best defensive squads in the NFL. They have one of the best opposing quarterback completion percentages against. They don't give up a whole lot. They can stop the run. That's why I have Alexander Mattison as a sit this week as well. I think this is where we're really going to see Minnesota struggle without Justin Jefferson on the squad. As you see, I also have KJ Osborne as a sit this week. He played more snaps than any Minnesota wide receiver last week, which was really nice to see. But this is the second worst matchup according to our wide receiver cornerback matchup tool. Even Addison is a guy that I'd be hesitant to play. I do like the ceiling a little bit more for Addison than KJ Osborne, but he's sitting on my bench this week. And then Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton. Jerry Jeudy, what are you doing? Nothing. Hanging around. Can't be trusted at the moment. He just can't be. There's reports that he's going to be traded. He's not out on the field running a lot of routes and playing a lot of snaps. And this is a really tough spot against the Packers. And in fact, Cortland Sutton has a tougher matchup. Rasul Douglas this week among the leaders in yards per route run covered out of all the corners that are playing this week. I don't like Russ. Javonte Williams is really that only guy that I would play. Josh Downs, this one may seem a little bit obvious, but he's been a trendy player in fantasy football over the past couple weeks, one of the most added players in fantasy football. And, you know, he's getting a lot of targets and a lot of looks with Gardner Minshew under center. As you see, I would not start Gardner Minshew. We just talked earlier about the 49ers, or excuse me, the Cleveland Browns is a number one total DVOA offense or defense, excuse me. They made Brock Purdy and Shanahan look silly, look like high school kids playing their first game of football. And Gardner Minshew didn't look good last week. Josh Downs had 5 grabs and a touchdown. He's got 11 catches in his last 2 games, got 14 targets. When Minshew played week 3 against the Ravens, 12 targets, 8 grabs, and 57 receiving yards for Josh Downs. But this is just a spot. I don't think you want to play people against Cleveland. And that's really what it's all about. I like Taylor. I wouldn't go the Zach Moss route. I don't think Taylor is going to have a great day on the ground, but he did have a bunch of catches last week, so he could maybe rack up a few points for you that way. And then there's Gus Edwards and Justice Hill. We had these guys as sits last week against the Titans, and this is another tough spot against Detroit. The Lions are for real. They're top 5 in total DVOA defense. They're top 5 in total DVOA offense. Only the Niners and the Lions are inside the top 5 in both total DVOA offense and defense, and only allowing 3.2 yards per carry, the Detroit Lions. They can stop the run, and they can do it very, very well. This defense is absolutely legit. Gus Edwards and Justice Hill are not touching my starting lineup. And then the Arizona running backs as well. Amari is not touching my lineup. Ingram's not touching my lineup, and neither is Williams. Amari had more snaps played than anybody else out of the backfield. Damian Williams, when he got on the field, he was getting touches, and the Ingram led the way in terms of like total yards. It's just a mess, and I think it's a mess that you want to stay clear of. A matchup against Seattle, you can't start any of these guys with confidence and understand that you may be in a really tough spot this week, but I would look elsewhere for another matchup. And then the 2 tight ends at the bottom. Tyler Higbee this week against the Pittsburgh Steelers. In 2 games since Cooper Kupp has returned, he has 6 targets, 4 grabs, and 38 receiving yards. You can't play him. I wouldn't even start him. I wouldn't start him, and I wouldn't roster him. Just Cooper Kupp coming back has really hurt Tutu Atwell, and it's hurt Tyler Higbee. It's a whole lot of Kupp, and it's a whole lot of Puka Nacua. So I'd be looking elsewhere. And then Cole Kmet has been really good this season, but of course, no Justin Fields in this spot. And I don't think Tyson Badgett's going to have a fantastic day. We see inexperienced quarterbacks lean on tight ends, and we could see Kmet get a few catches and DJ Moore as well. But I would try to stay clear of most pieces inside that Las Vegas and Chicago Bears game. So those are the sits, those are the starts, and we're going to answer a couple questions, and then we're going to get out of here because we have the NFL betting show as well. And again, tomorrow is the big day in terms of practice reports and things like that. Mr. Nice Guy, what up, y'all? Need help about a player tonight. PPR league, you got ETN, Ramondre Stevenson as your RBs, Diggs, Godwin, Nico Collins, Lockett as your wide receivers. Would you trade ETN and Lockett for Devontae Adams and Brian Robinson Jr.? I don't think, man. I really like what I'm seeing from Travis Etienne. I like him a little bit more than Brian Robinson. Of course, you get Adams for Lockett, which is it's not bad. It's okay. Like, you're certainly getting an upgrade at the wide receiver position, and then you would roll with Brian Robinson and Ramondre, and then you got Diggs and Adams with Nico and Godwin. It's not too bad, but the matchups are kind of tough for ETN moving forward. So yeah, maybe I would lean. It's kind of a sideways move, man. I think I like ETN a little bit more there than Brian Robinson. I think I would just kind of hang tight. Man, it's not looking good in Las Vegas, right? Jimmy G can't stay healthy. Get to Brian Hoyer. It's a mess right now for the Raiders. I don't know if I know Jake likes Adams as a buy low candidate, but I don't think I'm really into him. I would agree to flip Lockett. I think is a good one. Warrens or Evans PPR? I'd just take the upside with Mike Evans. Excuse me. I take the upside there and lean with Mike Evans. Trusting T-Law tonight? No. I would play Geno. I would play Geno over T-Law. Just kind of gave the reasons there about Geno. T-Law or Deshaun. Oh, my goodness. Just picked up Kyler. Not sure I want to roster 3 quarterbacks. I would just lean with T-Law. Both guys. T-Law has some really, really tough matches coming up. Deshaun's get a little bit easier, but I don't know if you can trust him at the moment, and I don't know if he's even going to suit up. It sounds like he's not, so you may have to start Trevor Lawrence tonight. But I would roll with T-Law there if you could. I'm going Watson here over Calvin Ridley. I just Marshawn Lattimore is, you can have moments, and Ridley's had some drops. Not a lot of consistency there. Christian Watson, good spot, right? A good spot against the Broncos this week. That's where I'm leaning there. Chat, is it worth it to start Kirk if T-Law doesn't play? Would you rather start Michael Thomas or Joshua Palmer over Kirk if T-Law doesn't play? That's a really good question. Yeah, if Trevor Lawrence doesn't play here today, I would look elsewhere. I would probably go Palmer. He doesn't grade out well in our wide receiver cornerback matchup tool, a tough spot against the Chiefs, but I would lean Palmer over those 3 guys if there's no Trevor Lawrence. But it does sound like he's trending in the right direction. Picked up Darrell Henderson in both leagues, PPR half point. Think he has a good chance as any of those backs to lead the backfield. McVay loves his pass pro. I would agree. And again, that when I talked about Zach Evans, it's not a must start, but it depends if you're in a pinch. And I would play him over the Baltimore and the Arizona backs as well. Welcome in, Daily Handle, Jordan Allen. Good afternoon, Means, and everybody in the house doing us a solid here. Smash the like button. Make sure you're subscribed to FTN. I swear it doesn't work for us, but man, you might as well. Teabag Kyle Woods. I feel like Royce Freeman and Zach Evans will be used more. Yeah, sure. They should be used more than Darrell Henderson, but not a bad idea maybe to pick up Henderson and stash him depending on how deep your league is. Pick 2. We got Foreman, Sutton, Zach Evans, Latavius Murray. Foreman and maybe Latavius Murray, man. Like, Damian Harris is not going to play. James Cook is, just a between the 20s type of runner. Lat has a couple touchdowns. They're nearly 10-point favorites. You're playing him hoping that he can just find the end zone, but I'd probably lean with the 2 backs here in Lat and Foreman. Sutton's a risky play. If you wanted to go that way, you could, but I think I'd go Lat. Yikes. If Watson's out, Jay Felicio in the house, I have to decide between starting PJ Walker or Tyson Bagent. Oh my goodness. I would go with PJ Walker. He showed me a couple nice things last week against the Niners. It's a little bit of a better spot. Amari had a good game. I would go with PJ Walker there. I don't think he can roll out the undrafted free agent quarterback, right? It's just really tough. What's going on, Albert? Albert needs some help. Pick 2. Okay, yeah, I think the chat is answering the questions for you there. It seems to be Sutton, Foreman if Roschon is out. If Roschon plays, yeah, I mean, if Roschon plays, you just go the other way. You go Sutton and Latavius. That would be my play there. Ramondre and Brian Robinson Jr. DFS winners this week. Yeah, we do. I like Ramondre this week a lot. Foreman's, it seems to be a consensus, Foreman and Sutton. I guess I just have a weird feeling about Latavius finding the end zone this week. And then we'll get out of here on these last two. We got Kyle Woods, PPR. Any of these guys better play than T-Law and Superflex? McLovin, Hendo, Downs, JSN. No, I would just play the quarterback and Trevor Lawrence. Oh, no, yeah. The SF messed me up because I think he's got San Fran coming up. But I would play Superflex. You got to go with the quarterback. You know, he tosses a touchdown here or there. Tosses one touchdown. He's probably going to have more points than all those guys. So if it was Zach Evans means him or Warren, my fault. Not okay. Gotcha. It was Zach Evans. I'd play Warren. There. I kind of figured I should have known that you would play Mike Evans. I'll play Warren because Warren is at least catching some passes. There's some uncertainty with Zach Evans. I think he's going to be the lead, but that's not saying a whole lot. Because we could see other guys get sprinkled in. I think Stafford's just going to, drop back and sling it a bunch. But if they get near the goal line, I think Zach Evans is going to be that guy. But the thing with Warren is, at least 8 carries in 3 straight games. He's got at least 3 grabs in every single game. He's got 6 targets in 3 of the 3 games he's played, 3 of the 5. So he's a good little PPR flex option there. There is an NBA preview show. We're not doing it live. We're going to publish it after Allen. So we're going to record that, I think, at 3 Eastern. And we're going to publish it on our FTN Network YouTube page there in a little bit. Thank you, George, for that. So we're not going to do it live. We're going to do just a show together, and then we'll post it. And if you have any questions, you can hit us up. We got to get out of here for now. Any questions, guys? Again, you know where to reach me at Chris Meaney in the YouTube section here. Tomorrow's a big day. Practice reports. We can go over the start and sits. We'll have some projections and some rankings for us. One more time. There's the props today. Oalve over 4.5 grabs, over 60.5 receiving yards. The longest reception over 22.5. Kamara over 29.5 receiving yards. And then Christian Kirk at over 4.5 receptions. You may want to wait out to see if Lawrence is going to play, but I do believe he's going to play. I like the Saints to win this game in a tight one. I'd say the score is 23-20. I know it could be 14-13. These offenses are not showing us a whole lot. Thanks, guys. George, get us out of here. We'll talk to you guys soon. Cheers.